When our dad was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's a year ago, it hit our family like a freight train. My dad, the man who taught me how to ride a bike and spent hours helping me with my math homework, started forgetting my name. His condition progressed faster than we anticipated, and after months of trying to care for him at home, we realized we couldn't do it alone. It wasn't an easy decision, but we agreed as a family to move him into a nursing home that specialized in memory care. It wasn't cheap, almost $6,000 a month, but it was the best option for his safety and quality of life. My sister, Emma, and I initially agreed to split the costs evenly. At least, that's what I thought. The first signs of trouble. Emma and I have always had a strained relationship. She's my older sister by 3 years, and while we were close as kids, adulthood created a wedge between us. She moved out of state for college, built a successful career, and always seemed a bit distant from the rest of the family. When it came time to discuss Dad's care, Emma assured me she'd do her part. "Of course, I'll help," she said during a family meeting. "He's our dad. We owe him that much." For the first couple of months, things went smoothly. I managed the bills and sent Emma an itemized breakdown every month. She wired me her share without complaint, and while it was stressful, I felt like we were working together to support Dad. But then the payment stopped. The excuses begin. The first time Emma missed a payment, I assumed it was an oversight. I texted her a polite reminder, and she replied with, "Oh, sorry. Things have been crazy at work. I'll send it over tomorrow." Tomorrow came and went with no payment. I reached out again, and this time, she called me with a long list of excuses. She'd had unexpected expenses, her bonus at work was delayed, and she needed time to sort out her finances. I tried to be understanding. Life happens, and money gets tight sometimes. But when another month passed without a payment, I started to get frustrated. "Emma, we agreed to split this," I said during our next phone call. "I can't cover Dad's care on my own." She sighed heavily, the way she always does when she thinks I'm being unreasonable. "I'm doing my best, but I have a mortgage, student loans, and a wedding to save for. You don't have kids or a house to worry about, so it's easier for you to handle it." I was floored. Easier for me? I don't have a house because I've been draining my savings to cover Dad's care. She brushed me off, saying she'd send something soon, but nothing ever came. Taking on the burden. For the past 6 months, I've been covering the entire cost of Dad's nursing home on my own. It's wiped out most of my emergency fund and forced me to cut back on almost everything. No more eating out, no vacations, and no big purchases. I even had to move into a smaller apartment to save on rent. Meanwhile, Emma's Instagram is full of photos from her lavish vacation to Italy and posts about her dream wedding plans. Every time I see one, I feel a mix of rage and resentment bubbling up. Last month, I finally hit my breaking point. I called Emma and told her, point blank, that if she didn't start contributing, I'd have to move Dad to a cheaper facility, one that doesn't specialize in memory care. "You wouldn't dare," she said. "I don't have a choice." I snapped. "I can't keep doing this alone, Emma. He's your dad too." She accused me of being dramatic and said I was trying to guilt trip her. "I didn't ask you to take on so much," she said. "You chose to manage everything. That's on you." Calling her out. After that call, I couldn't keep quiet anymore. I told our extended family about the situation, hoping they'd help me convince Emma to step up. Big mistake. Emma spun the narrative to make me look like the villain. She told everyone I was pressuring her for money she didn't have and airing private family matters to shame her. Some relatives took my side, but others accused me of being selfish and unsympathetic to Emma's financial struggles. "She's planning a wedding, for God's sake," one aunt said. "Cut her some slack." "Your dad wouldn't want you fighting over this," another relative added, as if I hadn't already sacrificed everything to ensure he had the best care possible. Where we are now. The family is completely divided. Emma hasn't spoken to me in weeks, and every time I try to reach out, she shuts me down. Meanwhile, I'm still struggling to cover Dad's expenses, and I don't know how much longer I can keep it up. I'm torn between anger and guilt. Part of me feels like I should just suck it up and keep paying because it's not Dad's fault Emma is selfish. But another part of me feels like I've already done more than my fair share, and it's not fair for me to shoulder this burden alone. I don't know what to do anymore. I feel like the bad guy for calling Emma out, but I also feel like she's gotten away with abandoning her responsibility. At this point, I'm exhausted, financially, emotionally, and mentally. If anyone has been through something similar or has advice on how to navigate this, I'd really appreciate it. Thanks for reading. Update. Hi everyone, I wanted to thank you all for your comments and advice on my original post. It's been a whirlwind few weeks, and there have been some major developments, some good, some not so good. I'm still processing everything, but here's where things stand now. Confronting Emma, again. After reading your comments, I realized I needed to approach Emma differently. I decided to write her a long email, laying everything out in a calm, factual way. I listed exactly how much I'd spent on Dad's care, how much we'd initially agreed to split, and how her lack of contribution was affecting me financially and emotionally. I ended the email by saying this wasn't about shaming her or creating drama, I just needed her to understand the reality of the situation. Emma didn't respond right away, but when she finally did, her tone was surprisingly defensive. She said she felt attacked and claimed I was blowing things out of proportion. She argued that she wasn't refusing to help, but that her financial situation was complicated right now and I needed to be patient. It was the same vague excuse she's been giving me for months, and I told her as much. Emma, I've been patient, I replied. But patience doesn't pay the bills. If you can't contribute financially, at least tell me what you can do to help. She promised to think about it, but I wasn't holding my breath. Dad's care. In the meantime, I started looking into alternative options for Dad's care. It broke my heart, but I couldn't keep draining my savings to cover the nursing home costs on my own. I found a slightly cheaper facility that still offered memory care, but it wasn't as nice as where Dad is now. The staff seemed competent, but the place felt a little cold and impersonal compared to his current home. When I told Emma about the potential move, she flipped out. You can't just move him without consulting me, she said. Consulting you? I snapped. You haven't paid a dime in 6 months. What right do you have to make decisions about his care? That argument ended with her hanging up on me. Involving the family. After that blow-up, I decided to revisit the idea of involving the rest of the family. The last time I tried, it backfired because Emma spun the story in her favor. This time, I approached it differently. I scheduled a family meeting, just me, Emma, and a few of our more level-headed relatives who might help mediate. I laid out all the financials again, showing everyone exactly how much Dad's care cost and how much I'd been covering on my own. Emma doubled down on her excuses, saying she was doing her best and didn't need to be ganged up on. But one of our uncles, who's always been blunt, called her out. Emma, you're planning a wedding and posting about your vacation to Italy, he said. Don't tell us you don't have the money, you just don't want to spend it on this. She got quiet after that, and I could tell the room was turning against her. A partial resolution. After the meeting, Emma finally agreed to start contributing again, but only a smaller amount than what we'd initially agreed on. She said she'd send $1,000 a month, which isn't half, but it's something. I still feel resentful because it's clear she only stepped up because she didn't want the rest of the family to think poorly of her. But at this point, I'll take whatever help I can get. How I'm coping. Emotionally, this whole ordeal has taken a huge toll on me. I've started seeing a therapist to help process the anger and frustration I feel toward Emma, and it's been a big help. I'm learning how to set boundaries and not let her selfishness consume me. Financially, things are still tight, but the $1,000 from Emma will help take some of the pressure off. I've also set up a GoFundMe for Dad's care, and a few extended family members and friends have chipped in, which I'm incredibly grateful for. Where we stand now. Emma and I are civil but distant. I don't know if our relationship will ever recover from this. I see her differently now, and it's hard to forget how willing she was to leave me to shoulder everything alone. Dad is still in the original nursing home for now, and I'm relieved I didn't have to move him, at least not yet. Just when I thought the situation was starting to stabilize, something completely unexpected happened. A few days ago, I got a call from the nursing home's administrator. At first, I panicked, thinking something had happened to Dad, but it wasn't about his health. The administrator informed me that a large anonymous donation had been made to cover the next 6 months of Dad's care. I was stunned. I asked if they knew who the donor was, but they said the person had requested to remain anonymous. At first, I thought it might have been one of our wealthier relatives, but no one in the family has mentioned anything. Then, a nagging thought crept into my mind, could it have been Emma? Confronting Emma. I called Emma immediately, unsure of what to expect. She answered with her usual aloof tone, but when I brought up the donation, there was a noticeable pause on her end. Why would you think it was me? She asked, a little too defensively. Because no one else in the family has that kind of money, I said. And because you've been feeling guilty about this for months, haven't you? There was another long silence before she finally admitted it. Fine. It was me, she said. I didn't want you to know because I didn't want another lecture. I figured if I just handled it quietly, we could avoid another fight. I was stunned. For the first time in months, Emma had done something selfless without making excuses or trying to justify her actions. The complicated feelings. I should have felt relieved, even grateful, but instead, I was conflicted. On one hand, I was glad she stepped up and did the right thing. On the other hand, it stung that she couldn't just say it outright, that she felt the need to hide her contribution instead of owning up to it. When I asked her why she didn't tell me sooner, she said, "Because no matter what I do, you'll always see me as the selfish one." I figured this was the only way to help without being criticized for it. Her words hit me harder than I expected. As much as I've resented Emma throughout this ordeal, I realized I'd been holding on to that resentment like a shield. Maybe I hadn't given her the space to redeem herself, and maybe I'd been so angry that I didn't notice her trying in her own way. Moving forward. We ended the call on a surprisingly good note. Emma promised to continue contributing the $1,000 monthly on top of the donation, and I thanked her for stepping up. It wasn't a perfect resolution, but it was a start. Since then, I've been reflecting a lot. This situation has brought out the worst in both of us, but it's also forced us to face some hard truths about our relationship. I think we both have a lot of work to do, not just for Dad, but for ourselves and our family as a whole. Where things stand now. Thanks to Emma's donation, I can finally breathe a little easier. Dad's care is covered for the next 6 months, giving me time to rebuild my savings and plan for the future. As for Emma and me, we're still figuring things out. It's going to take time to rebuild trust, but for the first time in a long while, I feel hopeful that we can get there. This journey has been emotionally exhausting, but if there's one thing I've learned, it's that family relationships are rarely black and white. People can be selfish and flawed while still capable of doing the right thing. Thank you again to everyone who supported me through this. Your advice and encouragement have meant more than I can say, and I'll keep you updated if anything changes. For now, I'm taking it one day at a time. It's been a few months since my last update, and things have shifted again, some for the better, some not so much. First, Dad's condition has progressed faster than anyone expected. He's started forgetting who I am entirely, which has been heartbreaking. When I visit, he'll sometimes smile like I'm a friendly stranger, but there's no recognition in his eyes. It's a hard thing to watch, but I know he's in the best place possible thanks to the care he's receiving. That's been my only solace in all of this. As for Emma, things are complicated. After her anonymous donation and renewed financial commitment, I thought we'd turned a corner. I even started letting go of some of the anger I'd been holding on to, trying to repair our relationship for the sake of keeping the family together. For a while, it seemed like she was making an effort too. She started calling me more often, asking about Dad and even suggesting we visit him together. But then I found out about the strings attached to her donation. She hadn't mentioned it before, but when I reviewed the updated nursing home agreement, there was a clause stating the donation was only valid if Dad stayed at his current facility and wasn't moved. At first, I didn't think much of it, but then I realized what it meant. Emma had essentially locked me into keeping Dad at this nursing home, regardless of whether or not I could afford it once her donation ran out. When I confronted her, she brushed it off, saying, "It's the best place for him. Why would you even consider moving him?" I tried to explain that while her donation helped temporarily, it didn't solve the long-term issue. Once those funds are gone, I'll still be the one footing most of the bill, and I might not have the means to keep him there. Her response was frustratingly dismissive, as if she didn't want to hear about my struggles anymore now that she'd done her part. It feels like we're back to square one in some ways. Emma still sees herself as the one who swooped in to save the day, but she doesn't seem to realize the weight I'm still carrying. On the rare occasion I bring it up, she accuses me of not appreciating her help, which couldn't be further from the truth. I appreciate it, I just wish she'd step fully into this responsibility instead of acting like her one-time contribution absolves her from everything else. The family is still divided. Some relatives think I should just let it go and focus on Dad, while others have started to see Emma for who she really is. The tension is exhausting, and honestly, I've started distancing myself from a lot of people just to keep my sanity. The only bright spot in all of this is that I've managed to find a bit of financial relief. I picked up some freelance work on top of my full-time job, and while it's not ideal, it's helping me rebuild my savings. I've also started connecting with support groups for people caring for family members with Alzheimer's, and it's been a lifeline. Hearing from others who are going through similar struggles reminds me I'm not alone, even when it feels like the weight of the world is on my shoulders. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know how much longer Dad will be with us or whether Emma and I will ever truly repair our relationship. But for now, I'm doing the best I can with what I have, one day at a time. Things have taken another turn recently, and honestly, I'm not sure how to feel about it. Dad's health has continued to decline, and while the nursing home staff has been doing an incredible job, it's clear we're nearing the final stages of his illness. He's started sleeping most of the time, barely eating, and the moments of clarity are almost entirely gone. It's devastating to see, but I'm trying to focus on being there for him, even if he doesn't recognize me. Emma has been visiting more frequently, which surprised me at first. She's been bringing flowers, sitting with Dad for hours, and even helping the staff when she's there. On one hand, I'm grateful. I know she loves Dad in her own way, and seeing her make an effort now is better than nothing. But there's this nagging feeling I can't shake, like she's trying to make up for her absence over the last year without acknowledging the harm she caused. Last week, after one of her visits, she asked if we could get dinner. I agreed, thinking maybe we'd finally have a real conversation about everything that's happened. Over the meal, she apologized, not directly for what she did, but in a roundabout way. She said she realized how much she'd been avoiding dealing with Dad's illness and that she was ready to take on more responsibility now. I wanted to believe her, I really did. But when I brought up the financial situation again, asking if she'd be willing to contribute more regularly going forward, she got defensive. She said something like, "I've already done so much, can't we just focus on Dad right now?" It was frustrating, but I bit my tongue. Arguing with her won't help at this point. Instead, I told her that while I'm glad she's stepping up emotionally, it doesn't erase the burden I've been carrying alone. She nodded, but I could tell it didn't really sink in. On top of that, the nursing home's administrator called me again this week to discuss long-term plans. The donation Emma made covered us through the next month, but after that, we're back to square one. I've crunched the numbers, and unless Emma commits to helping consistently, I'm going to have to make some tough decisions about Dad's care. It's all weighing on me so heavily. I feel like I'm constantly in crisis mode, trying to manage Dad's health, the finances, and the strained relationship with Emma. At the same time, I feel guilty for even being angry at her when Dad's condition is so dire. Shouldn't I be focusing on him instead of fighting with her? I've been leaning more on my therapist and support groups, which helps. But at the end of the day, it's still just me making these decisions, and the loneliness is suffocating. I want to believe there's a light at the end of this tunnel, but right now, it feels like I'm walking through an endless fog. Thanks for sticking with me through all of this. I'll keep you updated when there's more to share, but for now, I'm just trying to keep going. It's been a few weeks since my last post, and things have changed in ways I never could have anticipated. Some of it has been heartbreaking, and some of it has given me a kind of clarity I didn't realize I needed. I wasn't sure if I wanted to share this update, but writing it out feels like the only way to make sense of everything that's happened. Dad passed away last week. Even though we knew it was coming, the loss has been devastating. The nursing home staff called me in the middle of the night to let me know he'd taken a sudden turn. By the time I got there, he was already gone. I sat by his bed for hours, holding his hand and trying to process the fact that the man who raised me, who I'd spent the last year fighting so hard to care for, was really gone. Emma arrived later that morning. She cried when she saw Dad, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel angry at her. We hugged, and for a moment, it felt like we were just two siblings mourning our father. The days since have been a blur. I've been handling all the arrangements, planning the funeral, contacting relatives, and sorting through Dad's belongings. Emma offered to help, but her version of help has mostly been throwing out ideas while I do the actual work. I'm not surprised, but it still stings. The biggest shock came 2 days after Dad's death, when the nursing home's administrator called me again. I thought it was just a courtesy call, but instead, she informed me that Dad's account had been overpaid by nearly $15,000. At first, I was confused. How could that be possible when I'd been barely scraping by to cover his costs? After a few more questions, the truth came out. Emma had made another large payment in secret, enough to cover Dad's final months and then some. I didn't know how to feel. Part of me was relieved, it meant I could use the refund to cover the funeral expenses without dipping further into my own savings. But another part of me was furious. Why hadn't she told me? Why had she waited until it was too late for us to work together on this? When I confronted her, she shrugged it off. I wanted to do my part, she said. But I didn't want another fight. I figured it was better this way. Her response left me speechless. It was like she thought throwing money at the situation absolved her of everything that had happened over the last year. The funeral was a small, quiet affair. Some family members flew in, including a few who hadn't been in touch since this whole ordeal began. The atmosphere was heavy, not just with grief but with the unspoken tension that had been simmering between Emma and me for months. Now that Dad's gone, I'm left with a mix of emotions I can't quite untangle. I'm heartbroken over his death, relieved that the financial burden is finally lifted, and still angry at Emma for the way she handled things. But most of all, I feel empty. Caring for Dad gave me a sense of purpose, even when it was overwhelming. Now that he's gone, I'm not sure what to do with myself. I don't know if Emma and I will ever fully repair our relationship. We've been civil since the funeral, but there's still a distance between us that feels impossible to bridge. I think we both want to move forward, but neither of us knows how. For now, I'm trying to focus on healing and figuring out what my life looks like without Dad in it. It's going to take time, but I'm holding on to the hope that things will get easier. Thank you to everyone who's followed this story and offered support along the way. Your kindness has meant more than I can say, and I'll carry that with me. After the funeral, I thought the hardest part was behind us. I was wrong. This past week, we had the meeting with Dad's lawyer to go over his will, and it's thrown everything into chaos, again. I didn't expect any surprises, but what was supposed to be a straightforward process turned into yet another family disaster. Dad wasn't a wealthy man. He had some savings, a modest life insurance policy, and the house we grew up in. The lawyer started by outlining the basics. The savings and life insurance were to be divided evenly between Emma and me, and the house was left to both of us as co-owners. Simple enough, right? But then came the surprise. Dad had written a separate letter to be read alongside the will. In it, he explained that he wanted us to keep the house in the family. Specifically, he wanted it to remain as a shared space, a home base for holidays, family gatherings, and future generations. At first, I thought it was a sweet idea. The house was full of memories, and I liked the thought of it staying in the family. But Emma's reaction was not what I expected. As soon as the lawyer finished reading the letter, Emma shook her head and said, "That's not going to work for me." I was stunned. "What do you mean?" I asked. "I don't need a home base," she said flatly. "I live out of state, and I'm not going to keep paying taxes and maintenance on a house I don't use. We should sell it and split the money." I tried to explain that selling the house would go against Dad's wishes, but Emma wasn't having it. She argued that Dad's sentimental idea wasn't practical and that she had no intention of holding on to the property. The lawyer chimed in, saying that as co-owners, we'd both have to agree on what to do with the house. If we couldn't come to an agreement, things could get legally complicated. The conversation quickly devolved into an argument. I told Emma that I wanted to honor Dad's wishes, and she accused me of being unrealistic and stuck in the past. She kept bringing up her finances again, saying she couldn't afford to hold on to the house, despite the fact that her recent anonymous donations to Dad's care clearly showed she had money to spare. I offered a compromise. I'd take full ownership of the house if she signed over her half to me. I even said I'd pay her for her share over time, but she refused. "I'm not giving up my half just so you can sit in that house and feel nostalgic," she snapped. It felt like a slap in the face. Here I was, trying to respect Dad's final wishes, and Emma was acting like it was nothing but an inconvenience. The meeting ended with no resolution. The lawyer suggested we take some time to think things over before making any decisions, but it's clear we're at an impasse. Emma wants to sell the house and move on, while I want to keep it as the family home Dad envisioned. Since the meeting, we've barely spoken. I tried texting her to see if we could have a calm discussion about it, but she either ignores me or sends back one-word replies. Meanwhile, I've started researching my legal options in case she pushes to sell the house without my consent. I feel like I'm back in the same place I was before Dad passed, fighting with Emma while trying to carry the weight of the family on my shoulders. It's exhausting, and I'm so tired of the constant tension and conflict. I don't know what's going to happen with the house, but one thing is clear, this isn't what Dad would have wanted. He wanted us to work together, to stay close as siblings, to carry on the legacy of the home he built for us. Instead, it feels like his final wish has become another battleground. I'll update again if there are any developments, but for now, I'm just trying to figure out how to navigate yet another mess. Thank you to everyone who's been following this story. You've helped me stay grounded through all of this, and I appreciate it more than I can say. After weeks of back and forth and sleepless nights, I decided it was time to stop fighting with Emma. The constant tension was eating me alive, and it was clear we were never going to see eye to eye on Dad's wishes for the house. I knew what I wanted, but I also knew that holding on to the house would only deepen the rift between us. I called Emma and told her I was willing to sell the house. Her reaction was a mix of relief and smugness, which stung, but I bit my tongue. I reminded myself that this wasn't about her, it was about letting go of the stress and resentment that had consumed me since Dad's passing. We listed the house a week later, and it sold within a month. The final sale was bittersweet. Walking through the empty house one last time was gut-wrenching, but it also felt like closing a chapter. The proceeds were split evenly, and for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe again. With my share, I decided to move to a quieter town and buy a small house of my own. It's nothing fancy, but it feels like a fresh start, a place where I can build new memories without the weight of the past. Emma and I remain distant. We've exchanged a few polite texts, but the damage to our relationship is undeniable. Maybe time will heal the wounds, or maybe it won't. I've made peace with the idea that not every relationship can be salvaged, even with family. Final update. Selling the house wasn't the ending I wanted, but it was the one I needed. Letting go of the physical space has helped me focus on honoring Dad's legacy in other ways. I've started volunteering at a local Alzheimer's support group, sharing my experience and helping others navigate the challenges of caregiving. It's been healing in a way I didn't expect, turning my pain into something meaningful. As for Emma, I've decided to let go of my anger toward her. I don't condone her actions, but carrying that resentment around was only hurting me. I'll always wish things had been different between us, but I've accepted that some relationships can't be repaired. Dad's memory lives on, not in the house we sold but in the lessons he taught me, resilience, kindness, and the importance of doing the right thing, even when it's hard. I'm moving forward with those values, knowing that I did my best for him and for myself. Thank you to everyone who followed this journey. Your words of support and advice have been a source of strength, and I'll always be grateful for that. For now, it's time to move on and focus on what's ahead.